Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the Finding You podcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is August 4th, Tuesday, 2026. Tonight, we're going to be talking about what I'm calling the heroic task of listening. And for me, the important part of this is that we talk about listening so often and so many times in my career. I've had people share with me that they thought they were a good listener. Some even saying things like, I've trained, I've read, I've studied, I teach listening. But regardless of anybody's kind of self-report, one thing that remains consistent for me is we all can do better, and there are barriers to listening. So the idea of listening being a heroic task for me is to understand what barriers are in the way of our listening, and where then lies our work to be able to listen, and in a really real sense, to be able to love the people that are close to us. Before I get into that, let me talk about the upcoming items and the housekeeping items. If you are interested in attending a Finding You, which is our flagship program, we have those once a month. The next one is tomorrow, August 5th. I think actually we had somebody drop out just this week, if I'm not mistaken. So there is a spot if you'd like it, August 5th through 9th. That's really late. September 9th after that. The November Couples Intensive, I believe, is full. You can check that out if you'd like to. For all other inquiries, intensives, private intensives for couples or for families, if you're looking to attend our support group, if you're an alumni of our program, or you want to find out more about the Other Parents Like Me support group, every week on Saturday morning at 11:30 Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 9:30 Mountain Time where I live, there is an OPLM, and Other Parents Like Me meeting that is hosted and presented with the principles of Finding You. So if you want to attend a support group, if you're not an alumni, but you want to engage in a community where you're talking about the concepts that we talk about here, Saturday mornings, 11:30 a.m. Eastern, go to oplm.com. That's oplm.com for coaches, for a therapist, for all the other things Finding You. Can reach out to us via our email address at findingyouprograms.com, info@findingyouprograms.com, or you can go to our website portal and go contact us through that. I'm going to be in Boone, North Carolina this fall, September 27th through October 2nd. It's our next version of our Audacity to Be You workshop that my daughter Emma and I will be teaching. So this is a new setting. We've had the same workshop at the Omega Institute in New York. We just finished one about a month ago. Loved it so much. Wonderful community, and really an unprecedented amount of work that can be accomplished for $500 in a week-long workshop where you can dialogue, exercises, and engage in the community. So if you're interested in that, go to artoflivingretreatcenter.org, or again, you can contact us, and we'd be happy to connect you. If you go to the Art of Living website, you can click on the workshops, and then the name of our workshop is the Audacity to Be You. So if you'd like to attend that, that's great. If you're not aware yet, we have launched the Finding You Inner Circle. This is a subscription and financial support of the podcast. You have access to all the live broadcasts, and also you have 2 hours a month that aren't released to the general public. And this is especially important for the Ask Me Anything episode. So the Ask Me Anything episode is primarily only available to the Finding You Inner Circle. The cost of this is $10 a month, $100 per year. You can cancel at any time with no extra cost. So info@findingyouprograms.com is the place to go to learn more about that. With that, let's get into tonight's content. As I alluded to at the outset, one way to think about listening is really the most crystallized, concrete way we can love somebody. To hold space for somebody, to be able to take in somebody else's anger, distress, hurt, confusion, powerlessness, whatever they might be dealing with that feels overwhelming to them, to be able to take it in and listen to it, and feed back to the individual who's suffering a sense that they're okay, that we can sit with them and their big feelings. We don't have to run away. We don't have to erase their feelings. We don't have to make them happy. Maybe one of the most surprising things that I think people discover on this mental health journey is the realization that in so many ways, in the parenting relationship and sometimes in the couple's relationship, they have been contributing to their children and their spouses not sharing, not feeling, not connecting by sharing, because their inability to listen has been the barrier, has been the warning, the kind of lack of safety and lack of safe place for that person to unload or share their feelings. So people find so often that they are unconsciously contributing to a dynamic that they might even be spending all the rest of their time and energy and resources trying to make disappear. I often say when I'm talking about listening in lectures like this, you can just assume that you can be better at it. And I've shared this many times, but the hits keep coming, even in the last few days. Even since I've shared this experience with you guys on previous episodes. I think I was mentioning to my wife last week that the next episode would be about listening, the next podcast episode. And that was said with an earshot of my 18-year-old daughter, to which she responded and said, you're not as good of a listener as you think you are, or as you pretend to be. And in the spirit of trying to kind of make her wrong, not prove her wrong, but make what she's saying not true, I sit and I listen, and I accept the idea that she's probably right. Because every time up to this point in my life, that's been true of me. I have always thought at every stage of my life, in most every relationship, that I'm a better listener than I actually am. Maybe that's because I'm measuring myself against people who don't have this training. I can absolutely exhibit the skill if asked to perform it, but to sit with somebody. And for me, it's about the distress of my children and my spouse. To sit with somebody in their virtually unsolvable problems and pain. To be patient. To not be in a rush to get to some other place. And ultimately, to be able to set aside the parts of myself, the aspects of my personality, the wounding, those elements of my psyche that get in the way of listening, take a lot of concentration and work and time. Without spoiling the movie The Odyssey, because I know it's relatively recently released. But I can make the joke that it's been around for a few thousand years, so I shouldn't be called a spoiler. But a lot of people are going to be exposed, at least to Christopher Nolan's version of The Odyssey in this iteration of it. I've heard many people complain about the length of it. The length of the movie, the length of the story, the length of the journey that it took this one individual to go from the end of the Trojan War back to his island of Ithaca. A journey that should have taken him a matter of weeks. Took him a decade. And when I hear the complaint from people about how long the Odyssey is, how long the journey took, my thought has been, I think that reaction from people is very similar to the idea that the story is trying to depict. Folks, it takes a long time to find our way home. And I'm not talking about the home where Odysseus' wife Penelope and son Telemachus were, or his loyal subjects in Ithaca. I'm not talking about the physical home. I'm talking about the metaphorical home that we're all searching for, that is us. It takes so much longer, and the pace is so much slower than I think most everybody anticipates or believes. To love without knowing how to love wounds the person that we love. So this work, specifically tonight's broadcast, is about learning some things that will help us to love more. From the book, The Eden Project, which is a book, I'm going to borrow from parental ideas today, but also intimate partner and marriage ideas today. From The Eden Project, my very favorite book, I believe the most important book that I've ever read on the subject of marriage and intimate relationship. James Hollis says, if there's a single idea which permeates this essay, it is that the quality of all of our relationships is a direct function of our relationship to ourselves. Since much of our relationship to ourselves operates at an unconscious level, most of the drama and dynamics of our relationships to others and to the transcendent is an expression of our own personal psychology. The best thing we can do for our relationship with others and with the transcendent then is to render our relationship to ourselves more conscious. That is not a narcissistic activity. In fact, it will prove to be the most loving thing that we can do for the other. The greatest gift to others is our own best selves. Thus, paradoxically, if we are to serve relationships well, we are obliged to affirm our own individual journey. I worked as a co-founder, clinical director, and primary therapist for a treatment program for adolescents and young adults for almost 30 years. And it didn't take me long at all to realize that these children would be best served if their parents would go and do their own individual work. Not because I wanted to blame everything on the parents, but because if the parents could make the relationships with themselves more conscious, that it would do so much to serve the relationship with their child. They then could be a part of a healing dynamic with their child instead of this unconscious dynamic which unintentionally reinforces patterns of behavior that are so harmful. But after saying that hundreds and thousands of times, I was only able to receive a fraction of the audience to our program Finding You, which later became its own standalone program today. So if you come here in the context of a relationship, and I'm talking about marriage, parent-child, you being the child to your parents, maybe relationship to your siblings, if you're a therapist or a helper, if you're a doctor or a lawyer, or if you work in an office, if you sell widgets, doesn't matter what it is. All of those relationships are best served by you becoming more conscious. And I think the thing that is so deceptive is that our conscious minds have such a vivid life to them that we imagine that that's all that's going on. We have the illusion, as the psychoanalysts teach us, that it's the ego, the conscious part of us, the part that we're aware of, that is driving the ship, steering the ship. But in fact, my experience with therapy teaches me, and this includes my own self-study, my study of myself, that the vast pool of energy that is unconscious is really the thing that is directing our lives. So no wonder we are so confused and try the same solutions over and over again and think to identify the same problem without any subsequent change or success. No wonder we have that experience. No wonder people are frustrated with the length of the movie, which is just a small example, a tiny microcosm of what the Odyssey was supposed to communicate in the first place. Finding your way home back to yourself is arduous, painful, scary, confusing, circuitous, messy journey. So if I could appeal to anything in you, it would be to that part of you that wants better relationships, and to say, if you want better relationships, go to individual therapy, go to an intensive. If not Finding You, go to somewhere else where you can have an emotional, experiential relationship with those parts of yourself that are really affecting your life more than anything, affecting your relationships more than anything. To hold somebody, I talk about this a lot. If you've listened to me to any degree, you will have heard this sentiment in one version or another. Talking in intimate relationships is not easy sometimes, to tell the truth. And self-help authors and speakers and influencers are very vociferous on this fact. There's a lot of print, a lot of tape, a lot of recording that encourage us to tell the truth, to show up to our relationships and tell the truth about how we feel and what we're thinking. And that is one of the most important ingredients in intimacy. But the thing that gets very little attention, very little of the spotlight, the explanation, is what happens on the other side of the equation. Listening, holding space, staying silent, being present without turning your eyes away, without retreating, without gaslighting. To hold space, to listen requires a significant amount of psychic energy. It requires capacity. In my experience, maybe because of what I do for a living, my experience suggests to me that it is the underappreciated element in intimacy. And because so many people are wounded in a particular way, we don't talk about it or address it. We don't talk about the fact that parents, for example, have a very difficult time sitting with and listening to their children and their complaints about the parents' mistakes, how the parents have hurt them. And I'm not talking about these cases that I get questions about a lot where it goes on and on and on and doesn't stop. I'm not talking about that kind of berating. I'm talking about listening to somebody who wants to share with you how you've hurt them, to take it in, to metabolize it. And by metabolize it, I mean to digest it in a way, make sense of it in a way that doesn't threaten you. Where you can hold space for them, see the world, see the circumstances through their eyes, without making a judgment about the objective correctness of what they're describing or what they're sharing. Because almost everybody, including therapists, justify their inability to listen by, well, the person was saying it in a certain way, or the person was saying something that wasn't true. If those two elements have to be exactly what the listener agrees with, then I would say that nobody should be accountable for listening. Because listening is not listening to somebody share their position on the objective truth. It might sound like that, but it's them telling you what their experience is like to be alive. It's like they're telling you about their dreams. And as I wrote in The Audacity to Be You, in order to listen, you have to lose your mind. You have to stop thinking about it from your perspective. A great analyst wrote, the contained, the person being listened to, is more or less fully felt and understood by the container, that is the listener. At the same time, the container, the listener, can rely on additional resources to feed back to the person who's sharing a wider sense of the contained experience. In psychotherapy, what that looks like is somebody comes to me and confesses something that they've done that they're ashamed of. And instead of reacting the way that their family did, or does, or their parents did or do, or their friends did or do, I respond with curiosity, non-judgment. What was bad in their context in their life, in psychotherapy, in the psychotherapy room, is nothing. It's just what it is. Removed of all of that heavy, shameful, guilt-inducing energy. And that is what heals. That is what helps people come to an understanding of themselves. It's only when we're fully heard and understood that we can understand and hear ourselves. That's how Homo sapiens are built. Recognition from the other, the big person, is what gives the child a sense of self. How you think and feel about the child, not just what you say and do, have an enormous impact on their sense of self, their self-image. So if you can develop what it takes to develop, if you can get rid of what stands in the way, you can help the people that you love heal, come to know themselves. But the requirement for you to be able to do that is significant and requires the heroic task of you going and doing your work, of you sitting in a room where none of them are present, and you're telling your story until you have an experience of finding yourself, understanding the dents, the bruises, the wounds, the mistakes, the missteps, the misunderstanding, unlearning so much of what you've learned. I've been thinking about this all week. So many people think that the way that it went on in their family, the things that their family taught them are the way the world works. And it's not. The way your family did things and thought of things was just the way your family did things and thought of things. And the rest of the world is different than that. I talk about this idea that it's not your partner's job to make you happy, it's your job, and it's not your job to make your partner happy. The first thing that gets in the way of this ability to listen is our lack of individuation. We haven't become ourselves. I still think sometimes that it's my job to rescue my children and my wife from their distress. I love, as I've probably said this 3 or 4 times today, I love riding on white horses and rescuing damsels in distress. I love being the hero, the good one, the capable one. And I entered into marriage like most people did, thinking my job was to make her happy and hers was to make mine happy. And that almost destroyed our marriage. And I would argue it almost destroyed us individually. I don't find that works. Again, I want to talk about these ideas in the context of a couple, but we're really setting the table for listening. Joseph Campbell said, I think one of the problems in marriage is that people don't understand what it really is. They think that it's a lifelong love affair, and it isn't. Marriage has nothing to do with being happy. It has to do with being transformed. And when that transformation is realized, it's a magnificent experience. But you have to submit. You can't just yield. You have to give. You can't just dictate. So I think our inability to listen is one of the symptoms that can point us to these deeper truths. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter how well you think you can listen or how well you think you listened to a particular person. If they don't have that experience eventually with you, what you think about your listening skills is irrelevant. It's just an ego thing for you to try to feel good about. James Hollis said, again from the Eden Project, all projection occurs unconsciously. Of course, the moment one observed I've made a projection, one is already in the process of taking it back. More commonly, we only begin to reclaim our purchase on consciousness when the other fails to catch hold or reflect our projection. If there's an essential law of the psyche, this is really important. If there's an essential law of the psyche, of psychology, it is that what is unconscious will be projected. This is why you observe that quote, that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. But since the psychic consists of multiple split-off shards of energy, complex is in its archetypal forms, virtually all of which are unconscious, there are always ample opportunities for projection. And as I can never know the unconscious by definition or practice, so I can never know what energies might be acting. A lot of dense language there. Let me break it down in layperson's terms. What you don't deal with, you'll think is happening outside of you. You think that it is your spouse or your child that's making you unhappy, or your siblings, or your parents, or your clients, or your therapist, or your friends, or your boss. But ultimately, it is what we allow them. Of course, they can act on us without our permission, but what the space that we allow them to take in us. And if you haven't done the work to differentiate and know yourself, you'll be trying to keep anything they say outside of you because you can't be wrong or bad. So we take the parts of us that we haven't dealt with, that we haven't discovered. We take the parts of us that we have shoved into the unconscious because we were told that they were unacceptable. And we see those out in the world. This is what gets in the way of listening. And the hard part of it is it's not one simple equation. Mental health means that we have to advocate for ourselves. And also we have to compromise. Mental health means that we need boundaries, self-care, self-protection, but also flexibility. It's okay to ask for our loved ones to meet our needs. Can you help me? Can you support me? Can you attend to this need? Can I share with you what I'm feeling? Those are okay, and they get the privilege of saying yes or no. But to demand that you're my husband or my wife or my child or my parent, that you must listen to me. I think that's what goes into the equation when people ask about their child going on and on and on about their hurt or upset or angry feelings toward their parents. I want to develop the capacity to be able to listen to my children. But if I'm honest with myself, which is a difficult thing to do, to be, I have to acknowledge that sometimes I don't have the bandwidth, the patience, the spaciousness to hear it. And if I can't take that space, if that boundary isn't allowed, then everything else is going to fall apart. My daughter said to me not too long ago, she said, "You have to listen to me." To which I responded, I don't have to listen to you. I think she overheard what I teach, and she interpreted it that way. I said, "You don't have to listen. I don't have to listen to you. I want to be able to listen to you. So I do my work in part. I get to know myself in part so I can listen to you. But I don't have to." Sometimes we have to leave a conversation, a situation, or a relationship that will best serve us to leave. And sometimes we would be best served by staying. And you know, what works for you at 9 a.m. might not work for you at 11 a.m. Might not be right for you at 1 p.m. Might not be right for you tomorrow. So you see, there's no generic technique or imperative here that I can give to you, except for to grapple with these paradoxes, these dialectics. You get to choose the hard, but it's all going to be hard. And the quality of your life will be a reflection of those choices. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of listening a little bit better, a little bit more. First, as I see it, there are two basic tasks in intimacy. And I'm not talking about just romantic intimacy. I'm talking about closest connection between any two people. One is that one person is willing to tell the truth. Ideally, over the course of time, both are willing to tell the truth about how they feel. First of all, you have to know what you feel, right? That's a start that I even took for granted in writing this. You have to know what you feel. And then you have to summon the courage, the safety to be able to speak that truth. Because the reason that people can't tell the truth is because they have experience that suggests to them that when they tell people that they care about how they feel, their hurt, their pain, their sadness, their fear, their grief, whatever it is, they have experience that it goes poorly for them. They expect the defense. They've been conditioned to expect the defense. So knowing your truth, owning it, and speaking it is the first task in intimacy. But the second task is listening. In psychoanalytic circles, we call it containing. Holding space for the person with compassion, understanding, and curiosity. Speaking your truth means I feel this way. The feeling is in me. I interpreted what happened out here, but the feeling is mine. It's an ownership thing. I feel. It's being able to know in a given situation, what's my role? Do you want me to listen to you? Are you asking me to listen? Or do you want advice? Do you want to problem solve? What is it? Avoiding words like should and have to and must and need to. Good, bad, right, and wrong. These kind of moralistically judgmental, compelling, demanding words. Avoiding words like all or never or always. Right? Those kind of polarizing phrases, words, terms. And avoiding advice. These are all part of being able to speak your truth. Saying to somebody, this is what's worth. I was just listening to a friend the other day. I was sitting in a group, and one friend said, in my experience, when I've had that similar situation, this is what I did. And the other friend started to defend it and said, well, I can't do that because of X, Y, Z. And the first friend said, I wasn't telling you what to do. I was just sharing with you what worked for me. But we hear already should and should not. I hear people quote me using should and should not all the time. And I work really, really hard to eradicate those words and those ideas from my work. So I'm very dubious about whether or not I ever say should or shouldn't about these things. So we learn to assert ourselves, to take ownership, to speak in I feel terms, I think terms. This is what's going on for me. And we do it because it's a catalyst for connection. But again, most of us, I would say almost every client that I deal with has an aversion in important situations to share how they're feeling or what they want with their partner because they expect the defense. It's happened every other time. It happened their entire time growing up. So it's going to happen the same way again. So talking, sharing means that we are taking energy from somebody else. It might require some energy to summon the courage to tell our truth. But once the words are out, we're asking the people, the audience, the one listening, to hold space for us. And that requires patience, compassion, non-judgment. It requires some distance between the triggers that you feel and your mouth and your ability to respond and to stay quiet. Listening tends to be a giving thing. Talking tends to be taking. Listening tends to be giving. And after a difficult exchange that is executed well, the listener is going to oftentimes need a little space. And the talker is going to want reassurance. How many times in my marriage or in couples therapy I've seen this play out? Almost in every couple I've seen it. Somebody shares a really raw, honest, vulnerable, assertive, and clear statement of feeling to their partner. And if the partner can listen, the speaker wants reassurance. They want touch. They even are fooled in their own mind to think they want to hear what the listener's thinking. That's probably the most common error I see people make. Well, tell me what you're thinking. What do you think about what I just shared? And that doesn't go well. Because the listener then, if they're called to speak to what they heard and how they took it, they might say, well, I didn't agree with so many of these things. I can think of 3 counterexamples that don't fit your description of my behavior. You haven't really thought to understand my intentions or be curious about me, right? If you are to listen, it's not your time to talk about your triggers, to talk about your interpretation, your perspective. And I don't know how long that time needs to exist, but I know there needs to be a space between sharing and responding. In our marriage, we have finally learned that when one of us is sharing a difficult, vulnerable feeling, that the other person's job, almost in every case, is just to listen, or at least to listen. It's definitely not to come back with counterpoints. And that requires a holding of issues. See, the thing that gets in the way of listening is that we're still being triggered by our traumas, by our lack of secure sense of self. You see me that way? Well, I am not that way. You think I always do that? That would make me a horrible person, and I can't be that. The fact of the matter is, if we really knew ourselves, and that's a high bar that nobody really perfects. But for the purpose of the thought experiment, if we really knew ourselves, what other people say about us, we would see as a reflection of them and not really as about us. We would know our limitations, our weaknesses. We would know, if we knew ourselves, we would know that the stuff about us that's yucky, still messy, still unhealed. We would know our gifts and our strengths. And so what other people said or thought about us would just be a reflection of them, of what's going on for them. And mental health can be understood in a large measure as the awareness that what other people do and say is more about them than it is about us. See, loving is a giving thing and needing is a taking thing. Just like talking is taking and listening tends to be giving, loving is giving. What do I have? So if I have the ability to listen, if I have the wherewithal, I'm well fed, I'm not overworked, I'm not too tired, I'm not up against some clock. At least in this moment, I have a stable sense of myself. Just enough. That I have energy, love to give. I have ears to offer you. I have my presence to offer you. But if I'm hungry, if I'm tired, if I'm unaware of myself, right? My goodness and value is still up for debate in my own mind. If I'm exhausted emotionally, in any way, if I can't, this is the key, if I can't temporarily set aside my needs, I won't be able to love, because loving is giving. Loving means I have enough psychic energy to be there for you in service of what you need. And if I don't, it's not bad. It's not wrong. I didn't say you should love and you should listen. I'm just describing the kind of the landscape of the thing, the anatomy of the thing. All I'm saying is know where you are. Are you in a place where you have enough extra energy to give? If you just walk in from work or from a difficult meeting, chances are you don't have it. Chances are you might need an hour to sit and relax, to scroll on your phone until your nervous system can calm down. Stare at the wall and watch the paint dry. Loving is giving. Listening is giving. Needing is taking. Talking is asking for someone to hold space for us. Asking for somebody to dedicate their psychic energy to holding space for us. To at least for a time. To see the world, the experience through our eyes. You see, because I used to say this all the time. I would teach parents this. I said, it always works to say to your loved one, thanks for telling me. If I was you, I think I would think and feel the same thing. And I used to say that half joking. Because if I was you, I would be you. So that phrase, if I was you, I'd feel and think and see things the same, it's just true. People have good reasons to see the world the way they see them, to feel the way that they feel, to think the thoughts that they think. But because of our limited capacity, because our self-esteem and sense of self is still up for grabs, still up in the air, we try to control what people think and feel about us especially. The ability to listen is largely reliant on the extent to which one has healed. This is because in order to listen deeply, we must be able to temporarily put aside our need to be heard. To be able to listen deeply, we must be able to put aside our need to be heard and understood. If one has not healed sufficiently, or if one is in a dysregulated state because of the goings-on of the day, listening is unbearable. It will feel like self-betrayal. I have listened to people say, if I don't say my piece, how can I let them get away with saying things that are untrue? I have to say it. And my response is, that's fair, but that means you're not ready to listen, which is okay, but still true. It'll feel like self-betrayal. And the words will approximate, the words that they're sharing will sound and feel like the wounds from our past when we weren't heard. In order to be able to listen, you have to come to terms with how little you've been listened to. And you have to do the work of finding somebody that can listen to you, a therapist or a sponsor. Somebody somewhere that can listen to you until you have that sense of there I am, of being heard. For people who haven't done this work, listening feels to them like not being heard. Isn't that strange? Listening to my spouse when she's upset feels like she doesn't understand me. When I'm acting from my wounds, or when I'm in a dysregulated state. Listening will trigger the wound of not being heard yourself. So deep listening can be a measure of our healing, maybe as much as anything else. So when I talk about holding space or containing, what I'm really referring to is holding yourself together so you can be there for the other person and what they need in that moment. And again, it doesn't mean you should or have to or you're right or good if you do. It just means that you have the capacity. And it doesn't mean if you can't that you're bad or less than or unlovable. It means that you just don't have the capacity. Gill writes, empathic seeing is more common in people who have had a secure attachment history than those who have not. This is obvious, as empathic seeing is a crucial element in feeling that one belongs. You won't be able to hear your children and your spouse. You won't be able to see them unless you have adequately attended to your own family of origin, upbringing, childhood trauma. And I'm not talking about the big T obvious stuff. I'm talking about, did your parents have enough maturity so that they didn't need to be right or good? Were you constantly up against your parents' defenses? In my experiences, it was so much the forest for the trees analogy, right? It's the soup we're cooked in, that we didn't see it. But through psychotherapy and through exercises, we can look back and discover they weren't capable. They couldn't be wrong. I was always up against my parents' defenses. And then when you go out looking for people, maybe the saddest part of it is you look people that are equally defensive to your parents. Other people don't make sense. People that are more capable and healthier, they're strange beings and they don't seem to care or have passion or an opinion. People, of course, that are less capable, more defensive than our parents, we can see them clearly as incapable of being in an intimate relationship with. Your ability to listen is going to be contingent on the work that you've done for yourself. A couple of quotes from Thich Nhat Hanh. You must love in such a way that the person you love feels free. I think the things that I'm most proud of in my life, even though my daughter is right, I'm not as good of a listener as I think I am. Having said that, the things I'm most proud of in my life are when somebody comes and shares something with me that they wouldn't be willing to share with other people. And that might most importantly be when they share things with me about how I come up short. That's why as a psychotherapist and as a trainer, I teach therapists. When your client has the courage to tell you how you screwed up, how you hurt them, how you missed them, how something you said didn't feel good to them, you have this golden opportunity to respond differently than the way their parents did and their family. If you could, instead of being right and explaining to them how they misinterpreted you, or how they read it wrong or remembered it wrong, if you can simply say, thanks for telling me, I'm glad you're talking about this, I feel honored that you'd be willing to share that with me, knowing how that must have went for you in the past. If you can show up in that way and see it through that lens, you can change things. But if your instinct is to explain, either as a parent or a therapist or a big person in somebody's life, how they misunderstood, that's their depression speaking, that's their addiction speaking, right? And there are opportunities for those kinds of lessons. But in the heated moment where somebody's sharing something vulnerable like that, showing up differently, qualitatively differently than the way that others have and do typically, will make all the difference in the world. Thich Nhat Hanh also wrote, the secret of creating peace is that when you listen to another person, you have only one purpose, to offer him an opportunity to empty his heart. This next quote is a combination from James Hollis and from Mahatma Gandhi. The first sentence is from Gandhi and the commentary or comments are from James Hollis. And I know I read this a lot, and it is in my book, The Audacity of You, but I want to take a moment because it applies to listening in a way that I think makes this discussion richer. Gandhi once stated, "A coward is incapable of exhibiting love. It is the prerogative of the brave." And Hollis goes on, "Projection, fusion, going home is easy. Loving another's otherness is heroic. If we really love the other as other, we have heroically taken on the responsibility for our own individuation, our own journey. And this heroism may properly be called love." You see, what Hollis is saying here, and what he's building on Gandhi's comment with, is that listening requires work. And it's not necessarily intuitive or common sense. In fact, I would argue it is, for most people, not intuitive. And for most people, it is not easy. Because we're still fighting the narcissistic wound of we need to be good. I remember decades ago, my therapist said to me, the one way you know if somebody's a narcissist or not is whether or not they can listen. Because narcissists can't listen. Everything has to be in service of their greatness, their goodness, their grandiosity. And you know what, folks? Most parents, including me as a parent, have enough narcissism that it blocks us from being able to hear. So when Gandhi talks about it being courageous to love somebody, that only a courageous person, a coward, can't do it, he means this. This is to go into the cave, to go into the therapy session, to go look at yourself, come to finding you. Or if not, finding you somewhere else. Go somewhere where the focus is on you. You have to make it past the sentinels that tell you you're not the one with the problem and your situation is different, right? You have to fight that thought process, which, by the way, is the same exact excuses that the identified patient has. Finding somebody who's like you, projection, fusion, going home, is easy. But loving another's otherness is heroic. To have enough space, enough self-awareness, that's the great paradox, to have enough self-love that you can love another person is heroic. Most people don't do what Gandhi and Hollis and I am talking about. It's too hard, it's too scary, it's too uncomfortable. But I will tell you, it can be done. It just takes a long time. And the pace is slow. I wrote this document a couple years back suggesting that listening, and I listed them 0 to 5. Originally it was just 1 to 5. These kind of levels of capacity. Where's your capacity at right now? A 0 means I can't listen. I need time. I need space. It could be because I'm triggered, or it could be because I'm tired. It could be because I'm hungry, or it could be because something else on my mind. But a 0 means I can't. But nobody wants to admit that they can't. In fact, when I first made this, I've shared this with you before, when I first made this document with these skills on them, these levels of listening by capacity, I didn't even have 0 on there. That's how unconsciously I was avoiding my own lack of capacity, is I pretended like it didn't exist. I started with 1, but a client reminded me that sometimes we're 0, so I put that on there. The first level then is silence. Just keeping your mouth shut. Not rolling your eyes or sighing or making a lot of distracting sounds or gestures. Just listening. Staying present. I am starting to be able to do that more regularly with my children and my wife. Just listening. Just staying silent. Level 2, which is an increase in capacity and skill, is minimal encouragers, is what they're called in communication theory. Words like yes, got it, I hear you, nodding, eye contact, those kind of minimal, I'm tracking you, I'm with you. That takes a little bit more self-love for me to be able to do that, self-regulation for me to be able to do that. A little bit more energy is required. Level 3 is reflective listening. This is the more formal. So what you're saying is, when I left, you felt hurt because I didn't ask if you wanted to come. When I said to you this, you felt angry or you felt not seen. I'm reflecting it back, paraphrasing it back to see if I'm accurately reading you. That takes a little bit more capacity. And you keep going. And it usually will take multiple times. Most people, when they first try this, they want to do it once. And if they don't get it, they get frustrated. You keep going until the person says, yeah, you got it. Level 4 is empathy. I understand. That makes sense. I can relate. I can feel that feeling too. I've had that feeling before. I know what that feels like. That's level 4, empathy. And level 5 is accountability, when it's appropriate. If it's appropriate and authentic. It's phrases like, I'm sorry. You're right. I did do that. I really was angry. You're right. It wasn't just a joke. I was angry from yesterday or last night or this morning. Yes, I did do something passive aggressive. Right? So the reason I came up with this is because I have heard myself and others blame the speaker for their inability to listen because you didn't say it calmly or nicely or with an I statement. And while those things are helpful, and I can have boundaries around that if my capacity is waxing, if my capacity is waning, the point is, the number one predictor of my ability to listen won't be how you say it. It'll be to the extent to which I'm healed, free of my triggers, and have the necessary energy to lovingly hold space, set aside my needs, my need to be heard and understood temporarily so I can be there for you. So if you find yourself on either side of the equation of not recognizing that the listener must know and ultimately, ideally, own their part for it to be intimate, that is. If you understand that when my wife and I talk about this every day, she says, what are you at? Are you at a 1 or 0? And I don't even start at a 5, 4, 3, 2. The only thing I can promise and follow through on consistently is I'm at a 1. I can sit quietly and listen to you. Or I can't. I'm at a 0. Last night I had to tell my wife I was at a 0. So she took a rain check. We'll be having that discussion tonight. And it was not easy. I did not do it effortlessly. Nobody wants to admit that they're a 0. And most of us are a 0 throughout the day at various times. Nobody wants to admit it because we don't want to be the problem. We don't want to be bad. We don't want to be less than. That's what Gandhi meant by heroic. Or James Hollis meant by heroic. That's what Gandhi meant by a coward is incapable of exhibiting love. If you haven't forged ahead into your own darkness, understood your own wounding, started to sort it out, you can't do this stuff. So the task here is to learn how to listen, but maybe more importantly, discover what's in the way of your ability to listen. As Hollis says in the Eden Project, again, referring to the marital relationship, of the many projections possible, the most common are those onto the institution of marriage, parenting, and career. And what he's talking about is we think those things are going to make us happy. My mom and dad will make me happy. It's their job. My spouse will make me happy. My career success will make me happy. That's the projection. That means I'm taking my responsibility for my sense of self, my peace and serenity, and I'm projecting it onto other people and institutions, making them responsible for me. That's what he means by projections in this case. Of the many projections possible, he says, the most common are those onto the institution of marriage, parenting, and career. Regarding marriage, perhaps no other social contract has so much unconscious baggage imposed upon it. Few at the altar are conscious of the enormity of their expectations. No one would speak aloud the immense hopes. I'm counting on you to make my life meaningful. I'm counting on you to always be there for me. I'm counting on you to read my mind and anticipate all my needs. I'm counting on you to bind my wounds and fulfill the deficits in my life. I'm counting on you to complete me, to make me a whole person, to heal my stricken soul. And that's the way most people are operating in marriage. They are angry at their partner for their lack of serenity and happiness. And they're blaming their partner for it. And again, I'm not talking about one-off situations where somebody behaves poorly. Although that does fit under this category also. But I'm talking more on a chronic, continual basis. People think that the job of living their life is somebody else's, even the government's responsibility, some other institution or person. And until we take back responsibility for our own serenity, our own peace of mind, our own lives, and keep being resentful for all the people that aren't doing it for us, our world and our lives will continue to shrink and be small. Joseph Campbell said about marriage, he said, eventually facts will break through, destroying the projections of the early stages of the romantic relationship. And what comes next is love. In marriage, he taught, we must transform our passion into compassion. To which I added, or you can leave. You can divorce. But your psychological work is still there for you to do. And if it's not done, you'll recreate the same dynamic again and again until you become conscious of all your projections, of all the things that you're responsible for, that you're assigning to the people outside of you. In my experience, connection and ultimately a soulmate is the term reserved for those who work through the long, painful, difficult work of making the unconscious conscious, of taking back our projections and becoming who we are. And if the marriage or the relationship can survive this process, it is magnificent. And so we come to the place that we often come to in these. With intimacy, you must surrender the need to be right. But what you get in return is so much better. You get to be a self. You get to be you. You see, as we do our work, we change the frame from turning the other person into something bad to understanding and seeing the other as simply another human being. So when Gandhi said, that this ability to see other as other, when Hollis commented on Gandhi and said the ability to see other as other is the heroic task, that's what he's talking about. So here's what we take home. Listening requires psychic energy, maturity, capacity, healing. It requires a lot. You have to be able to temporarily set aside your need to be heard and seen long enough to attend to and listen to the other. We would be well served by owning our capacity, knowing where we're at. And if I'm the one who's speaking and you tell me you're at a 1, then I don't start asking you for the higher level skills like empathy and accountability and reflective listening. I know if you say you're at a 1, that's what I'm going into. Ownership is so hard. We just don't want to be who we are. We want to be good. It is so absolutely terrifying to be who we are. So I hope tonight you come away with a new aspect to your project, or maybe a new reason for your project. Because listening in a large sense is one of love's names. And if you're still attending to and grappling with your narcissistic wounding, listening is going to be an overwhelming challenge for you. It will be too threatening. But as we listen, we learn to fall in love with each other's dilemmas, with our spouses and even our children's. And we learn how to fight in a healthy, appropriate, assertive way, to stand up for ourselves. Remember, talking tends to be taking, and listening tends to be giving. Divorce and ending the conversation of the situation, I'm not telling you when you should do it, because that would be crazy. But I'm telling you, if it's not an option, you're in a world of trouble. Because then you're not staying because you want to or because you love the other person. You're staying because you are compelled morally. And that's most likely going to lead to resentment and more hurt. I think without divorce being an option, I think love doesn't exist. Connection, generally speaking, is higher up on the list of human tasks, human activities. So much more of a priority over behavioral management. At the end, my hope, my invitation for all of us is that we will continue to learn how to listen, to know that we still have work to do in that area, and to understand what in our work stands in the way of our ability and our capacity to love the people that we love in such a way that they actually feel loved. All right, folks. I'll be at the Art of Living Retreat Center with my daughter Emma, September 27th through October 2nd. Go to artoflivingretreatcenter.org for more information. If you would like to attend a Finding You Intensive October 5th tomorrow, September 9th, October 7th, I'll be doing a couples one November 11th. It may be full, but you can check it out with our admissions crew. Email us at info@findingyouprograms.com or go to our portal on our website. For all other inquiries, for private intensives, for couples and for families, if you want the access to our support group, which is on the third Wednesday of each month, which will be the 19th this month, if you're an alumni, or if you'd like to learn more about the Finding You support group that OPLM has as an open free meeting for anybody that wants to attend. Saturday mornings, 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 8:30 a.m. Pacific. You can email us, go to our portal, or go to oplm.com. If you're looking for a coach or a therapist who works in this model, you can contact us through those means, and we'll be happy to do our best to connect you to one. I'll be doing an Ask Me Anything episode on this Thursday, so if you're listening, if you're watching live right now, send in questions in advance to our email, info@findingyouprograms.com. I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can, speak to any topics that I can on the subject of psychology, relationships, spirituality, the psyche, anything within my wheelhouse, anything I can speak to, I'll just tell you that. Thanks for joining me. I hope this is a helpful point of contact. And on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, thank you for doing this work, because you doing your work makes all the difference in the world. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you Thursday night. Take care. Bye-bye.